Hey everybody, this is Jason Alba once again for the free April Pluralsight offer. This month I am talking about my Pluralsight courses and topics that have to do with soft skills and professional development. I am hoping that this is a time of reflection and a time of sharpening your own saw. That's kind of what my whole objective was when I put together this series, where I go through a different course or topic every day. So today we're going to talk about a course that's kind of interesting. It's called Building and Managing Your Career Plan. And this course is, let's see, I think it's an hour and 36 minutes. So it's not too long. And it was interesting as I went through this course. I remember over the years thinking, because let's see, this came out, or at least it was updated in 2016. So it's at least 4 years old. And I remember thinking, I've already talked about career management, and I've talked about designing a killer job search, and I've talked about all these things that have to do with careers. And of course, Dan Appelman has a great course on careers for IT professionals. And what is this really going to add? And so I was going through this course this morning, and thank goodness I was pleasantly surprised with how it is. So I'm not ashamed of it. I don't feel like it's fluffy. I don't feel like it's stuff that's already been beaten up by all these other courses. This is something that I really can stand behind endorsing. So a little bit of housekeeping real quick, then I'll tell a quick story, and then we'll review what's in the course and some of the principles that I just wanted to highlight. So this is April of 2020, and the big deal this month is free April. Up here you can see this hashtag, which you'll find in whatever social media platform you're looking at. And basically Pluralsight is offering a free account for the entire month of April. Even though we're on the 22nd, there is still over a solid week that you can get access to Pluralsight for free, which is pretty phenomenal, because they've done free weekends over the years, but they've never done anything for a month. And to be honest with you, we have 8 or 9 days left till the end of the month. That's awesome. Like, that 8 or 9 days is quite a bit, and there's a lot you can dig into and get value out of. So I definitely recommend that you go check out free April. Just notice on your screen, there's a link right here next to the button that says next to free April. It says sign up now. That's the one you want to click on. This will get you into the rest of April for free. Don't put in your credit card. There's nothing to cancel at the end of the month, which is awesome. Down here below, it says start a free 10-day trial. That's fine too, but it's not going to give you the same complete free access that free April will. If you're watching this after April of 2020, reach out to me or reach out to any other Pluralsight author that you can network into and ask for a 30-day pass, because sometimes we have access to give out 30-day passes, which is kind of like free April. All right, so tomorrow we're talking about my course on difficult conversations. And this course is really meaningful for me. 2 reasons. One is I took about a 2.5-year hiatus from Pluralsight. 2.5 years of not making any courses. And, I really did need the break, because right before that I did a lot of courses. But I missed it for sure. And in those 2.5 years, I did stuff and I kept myself busy. But this was either the first or the second course after coming off of that hiatus. So it has a special place in my heart. Also, I'd been working in corporate America for about 9 or 10 months before I started this course. And the difficult conversation topic was a huge part of the culture and what I heard in the hallways and from leadership. And so it's an awesome course. It's an awesome topic. And it's an excellent soft skill that we should all be working on, because we're going to have difficult conversations, right? So that's tomorrow, which I think is Thursday. It'll be 4/23, April 23rd. All right, so here's my story. If you've been watching any of these over the years, you heard me talk about how I got my first internship at Simplot, and I was walking out of school on a Saturday with a buddy that I was studying with, and the professor was right in front of us, and I was like, hey, what am I looking at? Like, when I graduate, what kind of job am I going to get? How much am I going to make? What's my career path look like? And he was like, well, you're going to start out making $30,000 a year, and you're going to sit on the phones doing tech support. And I was like, man, I didn't go to all this school to do that. I mean, I know I can go get some certifications right now in a few months and go do that. How do I piggyback that? How do I jump over that? And so anyways, that landed me on the path of doing my internship, which was amazing. It was a beautiful experience. It was not one of these, 2-month summer internships. It was, I think I was there for about 1.5 years, and it was really spectacular. And then my plan was to go to Austin, Texas, because that's where everything was happening. Dell Computers was just super hot at the time. And of course, they've always done well, but they were an amazing employer. And then, of course, when you have an employer that size in anywhere, you're going to have all the peripheral employers, the contractors and the providers and all the stuff that works with that type of employer. And Austin was just a hotbed, and so my idea of success was to get whatever school I needed to get, and then I was going to work my way up. I would do this pretty quickly, so I'd be a young executive. I wanted a corner office. I wanted a nice view. I wanted a waiting room. Not that I needed to make people wait, but I don't know. I don't know. These are like weird things that we get out of probably shows and movies that we watch, right? And the weirdest part was I wanted a private bathroom. I have no idea why, but I for some reason in my mind, I knew I would have arrived if I had a private bathroom, and that's what executives get. I think, I don't know, maybe not anymore, but back in the 1900s, that's kind of where my brain was. So anyways, that's what I wanted. Obviously, I'd be making tons of money. I would be making a really healthy salary, and I would have bonuses and access to the company jet, which is when I first started at Simplot. This wasn't a perk when I left Simplot, but when I first started at Simplot, you could actually go into the internet and see if a seat was available on one of their, I think, 16 jets or however many they had. And if you needed to travel somewhere and they were already going there, you could hop on an empty seat, which was so cool. And I thought, all right, I want access to a company jet. I don't need my own jet. I don't want my own jet, of course, because it costs so much. But hey, if I can get on a company jet that the company pays for, that'd be freaking awesome. So that was my idea. That was my plan. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have this amazing executive career. When I was at BYU, which is where I started school, I was going to do I was doing international business. Like, that's the path that I was on. And I thought I was going to work around the world and learn languages and raise my kids in different cultures and have these rich experiences as a international business executive. And then I switched schools to go to Idaho State, it's a whole story in and of itself and a whole experience. Anyways, long story short, I got into information systems. So I had a almost technical degree in because they didn't have international business. That's why I still wanted to do international business, but they didn't have that degree. So it was of all the 5 business classes, the 2 that I thought I could actually get a job in right away would have been something with computers, hence information systems, or accounting. And I was absolutely not interested in accounting. So I thought, okay, so I'm going to get into information systems. I don't know if I can be on tech support desk and have that lead into my plan of having a corner office. But apparently that's the path that I was on, that I wanted to not be on. And I didn't. Long story short, I didn't go into tech support. My first job out of school was called IT manager. And as I said a few days ago, I wrote the title, I wrote the job description, and I defined the salary. It was pretty trippy. So anyways, that's kind of my backstory. and what my goals were and my hopes and aspirations. And instead of Dell, the first place that I got a real job at, which was the IT manager role, was at a, wait for it, not a computer company, not the other big employer in town was semiconductors, not there. I got a job at a janitorial company. And this was not on my roadmap. This was not on the path. This was not the plan. And so I remember one time I went to a conference, from one end of the state to the other. And I went with one of the owner's executive administrators and or assistants. And we were driving. It was like a 4-hour drive. And she said, Jason, do you realize how many toilets had to be washed in order for us to go on this trip to this conference? And I was like, what an absolutely horrid way to think about money and value. And, I didn't want to have to, every time I turn around to, buy a thing or do whatever, spend money, I didn't want to have to think, wow, that just cost 400 toilets. I just thought that was such limited thinking, and it drove me nuts. But my role at the janitorial company was what I wanted. Like, I was IT manager, and I had position of power and authority, and I was making a real difference. And I was doing strategy, and I was doing vision, and I was doing execution, operations. I got to build a little team. I managed vendors. It was cool. Like, it was really cool. And I was in a lot of executive committee meetings because I was like the most IT person they had, and clearly things were moving towards computery stuff, and so they would bring me in. They wouldn't let me sit on the committee, but they would bring me in a lot and consult with me, and so I just loved that. And then eventually, after a merger and acquisition that we did, I ended up on the executive committee of that new organization and on the board. So that was cool. I didn't aspire to work at a janitorial company. But I did feel like I was, I guess, working my plan, my path. And eventually that role could lead to a bigger role, which could lead to a bigger role, which might take me to another company. And eventually I had to get my corner office with my private bathroom and access to company jet, right? So anyways, I think most of you know what happened. That lasted for a few years, and then the merger happened, and that lasted for a few years, and it was messy, and it was yucky, and it was ugly, and then I got laid off. And so Friday the 13th of 2006 in January, I get laid off, and all of my plans had been derailed. And I'm thinking, okay, so I had this idea. I did school, I did MBA, I have foreign language, I have a beefy resume, I have big job titles, I have this experience. I did everything. I was doing my part according to the plan, but getting laid off wasn't part of my plan. What I wasn't expecting was, after having gotten laid off, I was not picked up right away. I really was shocked that I was not picked up right away. It was a good economy. I thought I had a pretty beefy background and stuff. But what I learned was the job thing just wasn't meant to be for me during that time. It was years and years later for a little bit, but somehow I got put on a whole different track. I went from corporate America on what I thought was a fast track to becoming an entrepreneur. And that's okay. I look back at it now, there was some highs and there was a lot of lows. If this was a roller coaster, like, it went way down, lots of down before there was any bits of up. And there, the ups were awesome, but they were little and not very frequent. There was a lot of downs, and it was very, very difficult. But here I am, 14 years later, and I can't even imagine having it been done any other way, or having the future that I have in place now. It would be completely different if I would have stayed at that last job. So anyways, so what about my plan? What about my path? What about my ideas? What about my vision? Was it a waste of time to sit down and purposefully and strategically think about where I wanted to be and what I needed to do in order to get there, right? I don't think so. I mean, if I didn't do anything, that would have been my waste of time. If I woulda, coulda, shoulda, and was going to in a year, or maybe next year, or maybe later, I would do this thing or create or learn or build or certify or school or whatever. If I would have kept putting all those things off, then my plan would not have been, worth sitting down for. You have to figure out what your plan is, what you want it to look like, and then start working on it. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've seen with people who are like, hey, tell me how to write a book. Tell me how to do a course. Tell me how to start a business. Tell me how to become a speaker. And it's like, you just do it. I mean, I know you can learn and you should learn strategies and tactics, and you should learn how it's done. And I mean, I did. I learned, like, when I started getting paid to be a speaker, I eventually was invited to and went for quite a while to the local chapter of the National Speakers Association, which was amazing. And in that experience, somebody was like, hey, one of the things I do when I'm on stage is I leave them with CDs. And I'd sell CDs from the back of the room. And I was like, oh, it's really interesting. And I was thinking about that. And I decided to make a DVD. Guess who knew how to make a DVD? Not me. So what do? I mean, Google becomes your best friend. And I learned how to make DVDs, and I learned how to order them for the best price so that I could get the best margin on them. And then I learned how to sell from the back of the room, which was interesting because most of the places that I would go speak were at job clubs where people had been unemployed for months. They were probably going to be unemployed for more months, and they didn't even know how they were going to pay their utility bills. And a lot of times I was told, don't sell anything. You cannot sell anything in this audience. And my response became, I'm not going to push anything, but I'm going to make it available, because people always ask me if I have something that they can buy from me. And so anyways, I got to the point where I remember I was in Arizona and I was at a job club, and there was, maybe around, 80 to 100 people. And this blows my mind when I think about it. I sold half of the audience on my DVD. Half the audience. I mean, what speaker goes somewhere and sells 50% of the audience? It's unheard of. And I did that to a bunch of job seekers that didn't know where they were going to make their money from, or when they were going to make money. I had people say, hey, you know what? Can I take it now and pay you when my unemployment check comes? Like, they knew there was value. They wanted the value. My point is, I didn't know how to do any of that before. I didn't know, but I jumped in and I learned and I moved down the path. Now, the interesting thing is, and I think I talked about this yesterday, when I got my dream job a couple of years ago, it was such a weird job posting. They wanted somebody who had developed technical products, so product manager that had technical experience, who had written books, and who had been on stage and had done online courses and had done podcasts and had done radio interviews. And all these things all put together, like individually, they're not weird, but who in the world has done all of these things? And it was just so bizarre. But it was because I did them. I had a plan. My plan didn't work out, but I was doing things along the way to move forward on my plan, and the new opportunities came. And so one of the things that I really talk about at the beginning of the course, you can see here, the first module says getting from here to there, creating the path to your career goals, right? So you need to have goals. What are your goals? Where do you want to be? When I listen to Dave Ramsey and somebody calls in and they're like, yeah, I have this much debt and we make $20,000 a year. One of Dave's big things is for married couples, he says, you need to go sit down with your husband and say, where are we going to be in 5 or 10 years? Or better yet, how are we going to be making $100,000 in 5 years? What are we going to do? Is it education? Is it start a business? Is it learn a trade? What are we doing so that in 5 years, we're not making $20,000? You need to have that vision, the goals, the objective, whatever to work for, okay? And then one of my favorite phrases is work backwards from there. So you set up where you want to be, and then you figure out what are the steps that I need to take in order to get there. Okay. So you have this goal, and then you create this plan. And what is that cartoon? The Family Circus. You guys remember seeing from the newspapers? And I haven't seen it online, but in the newspapers, it was one of the most popular. It was I think it was called The Family Circus, where it was usually a mom and then her crazy kids. And the kid was like, I'm going to go to little Johnny's house, and Johnny lived next door. And the mom's like, okay. So the kid walks out the front door, and instead of going straight to next door to little Johnny's house, he goes like for 2 hours all over the neighborhood, like circles the playground and goes around here and checks this out. And, just like little kids do, they go all over the place. So the plan is go to Johnny's house, which is right there. And the actual was all over the place. And that's how I think of how my career plan and path has been. It's okay. It's okay. I don't want you to think that, first of all, I don't want you to say, I have no control over anything that has to do with my future. Like that right there is a losing attitude. It might be true that you don't get your goals or your objectives, or that you go on the plan or the path that you create. That might all be completely true. However, because I said this before, I have high locus of control. I believe that the things that I do will have an impact on my future, right? Or on things in general. So I believe that I have a purpose here, and that I should try to do stuff because that's going to make a difference. And then all of a sudden, Enron. I don't know if anybody here remembers Enron. This happened a few years ago, where one of the largest companies in the US went belly up. And I can't remember. I talk about this in my course, in multiple courses, but I think they had 30,000 employees. And just to be conservative, let's say every employee had a spouse and a kid. So there's a family of 3. Enron's collapse touched 90,000 people. That's nuts. 90,000 people. Retirements evaporated. If your retirement was Enron, okay, if you were planning on taking a pension, or if you had stock in Enron, it went away. And there were people that had, they were 64 and a half, 64 and 3/4. They were almost going to retire, and their entire future went away. Well, that was a long time ago, right? So whatever, it doesn't impact us. By the way, I should mention those 90,000 people, or the 30,000 jobs, I'm going to guess there was probably 10,000 small to medium-sized businesses that were also heavily impacted by the collapse of Enron. We're talking probably about hundreds of thousands of individuals who had at least their career was jolted. And on a worse scale, many of those people, especially the 65-year-olds who are gonna retire. Can you imagine retiring one day and then the very next day finding out that your pension plan just completely dried up because a couple of guys went to prison? They made some bad choices. So hey, you know what? Let's say that's too detached. It's too far away from us. Hey, it's April of 2020. What's going on right now? Last I heard 5-ish days ago, 22 million people have filed for unemployment in the US. Just a week and a half earlier, it was 16.8. I still have the tab up on my screen. 16.8 million people had filed for unemployment a week and a half later, and it's millions more. I knew that there was going to be a lot of people filing for unemployment. I knew a lot of people were going to lose their jobs. I had no idea the types of people that were going to lose their jobs. Last night I was in bed on Twitter, just scrolling through my feed, and I saw that one of the online tech schools, I saw 3 or 4 people that I follow. They're like, well, just got laid off from this company. They were trainers on training people how to do technology. And I was like, whoa, and I've heard from DBAs and developers, and these an iOS, a mobile phone developer, got laid off. And I told my wife, I said, 5 years ago, you couldn't find a mobile developer because they were all in super high paying jobs and really happy. And now this guy has an immense amount of skill that was very, very marketable just weeks ago, really. And now he's out on the street, right? And so, COVID-19, coronavirus, that has had a huge, massive impact. That's just something that happened that we had no control over. Enron was something that happened that a couple of people caused havoc for hundreds of thousands of people. And let's say there's nothing that's happening in the world. Like when I got laid off in 2006, like I said, it was a great economy, and the unemployment rate was low and everybody was hiring, but nobody was hiring me, right? So my unemployment rate was 100%, regardless of what else was happening around the world. I'll tell you right now, man, you can control some things, but there's just a lot of things that are outside of your control. So what does that mean? Should we even have goals and objectives? Should we even work on our career path? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because even though I was kind of out of control of when I would get hired or what I would get hired to do, I started doing some things. And then I started doing more things. And I started learning skills. And I started creating revenue streams, which was freaking amazing. I talked about that, I think, yesterday in the YouTube live. I started creating income that replaced multiple times my previous income. And that was amazing. It was awesome. And then when I needed a change of scenery and I needed to find a job, my skills were all of a sudden valued. And they didn't care about my degree, although they said they wanted someone degreed. I don't think they cared about my MBA. Nobody's asked me about my GPA. My heavens, who cares about your GPA? What are your skills? What are your marketable skills? Are they current? Are they relevant? I wrote a blog post a few days ago about how this April 2020 thing is like the winter of your career, where like everything is stopped and frozen over. This is a time of reflection, of recalibration, of digging in your heels and learning and creating so that you can have and develop those skills that will make you more marketable. Should you plan? Absolutely. Is your path going to go the way you planned it? No way. I doubt it. I know some people who have had great careers and it went exactly as they wanted it. And I'm jealous of that. Like, honestly, it's like, how much easier would it have been to just stay at one company and get promotions and, figure that out? I mean, that would have been so much easier. But the people I talk to in those situations are kind of bored usually. Like there's always this grass is greener thing. Your plan, I think, is going to look like that kid, running all over the place before he finally gets to the end. And that's okay. We have to be okay with that level and that kind of change. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't make a plan. So let's jump in real quick and talk about these things. The word I wrote down, there's a key word that I wrote down, and it's in the course. So in the first module, getting from here to there, creating the path to your career goals, I talk about some related courses. I define what a career path is. I talk about having a career vision, what your dream title is, right? So I'm walking you through the steps of figuring out where do you want to be, okay? The path to your dream title, which is working backwards to figure out how you get there. What are your motivators? And I was really intrigued in business school when they talked about the idea that money doesn't motivate. And I was poor. I was a student, and I was like, well, it motivates me, and so it definitely, money is a motivator. But what they said, based on studies, that once you earn a certain amount, and back in 2000 when I was in school, the amount was like $70,000. Once you earn $70,000, more money doesn't make you happier. More money is not necessarily a motivator. And I thought, well, try me. I mean, I would like to make that because I don't make anything right now. And then give me a 140 and let's see if that contributes, right? So I know that we need to separate money and happiness and having things and happiness and stuff like that. And I don't have a problem with that at all. But in this career motivators, I want to talk about, why, what's your why? It goes back to Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek really focuses on the core of what's your why. All right, alternatives and options, experience and education, personal and professional brand. It's kind of funny to me that in a lot of my courses, I go back to branding and networking and things like that. The next module, planning moves to each milestone and goal. And so I give an example. I break down the vision. I break down and do an analysis of that breakdown. I talk about 3 components of building your path. I talk about SMART goals. I talk about how real your path was, because, you know, my path wasn't very real. If I really wanted the stuff that I talked about earlier, I probably should have gone to a different school. Nah, scratch that. I definitely should have gone to a different school. Hey, by the way, let me give you a snippet on schools. 2 of my favorite thinkers about higher education is Tim Ferriss. He has a fascinating idea on alternatives to an MBA, which doesn't have to do with other schools, but it's really fascinating. I actually love the idea. And then a lady named Penelope Trunk, who used to blog a lot about job search stuff. And anyways, as I was reading them both around the same time, one of the things that really jumped out, I'm pretty sure it was Penelope. She said, you don't go to school for the school. You don't go to school for the education that you're going to get. Like, if you're comparing 2 or 3 or 5 different schools, you shouldn't look and say, well, that's the best school for this. This is her argument. She said, you go to school, and let me rephrase that. You go to the MBA program. You go to the MBA program for the network. And I was like, well, crap, because my network from my school sucked. There's no networking with my alumni. They've done a horrible job compared to when I started Jibber Jobber Princeton. I was talking to someone in the Career Center at Princeton, and they were like, man, I love Jibber Jobber. And I was like, great. You want to put this in front of all your students? And they said, oh, our students don't listen to us. Like, they graduated from Princeton. They reach out to the other alumni, and those alumni hire new Princeton graduates. And I was like, yeah, well, that's not happening from the school that I went to. So anyways, let's see. I guess I just went on a little rant about education. The rules of getting a job, mentoring relationships. And as you know, I have two courses on mentoring, actively monitoring opportunities. I was just thinking last night, I did a webinar for about, 60 job seekers in Northern Virginia. One of the things that was on my mind was that you should go right now. And if you're working, like if you're not working, you're already doing this, but if you're working, go to Indeed and do a search for your job title. It doesn't have to be your company, but go look at your title and see who's hiring what in your title. And I'll tell you what's really interesting, because I'm talking about actively monitoring opportunities. I don't want you to just do an analysis on your title. Go look at the job descriptions for your title. And I think it'll be really interesting. When I've done this in the past, I've looked and I'm like, okay, I do that and I do that and I do that. What the heck is this? I didn't even know that was part of the job. So there's 2 opportunities here. One is that you can learn about things that you should be doing in your job to add more value as a professional. That, in my mind, is part of your continuing education, where you're learning how to do and be better at what you're doing. The other reason why that's important, though, is because it's preparing you. It's letting you know, in today's market, this role is expected to do this. And if you're walking out with 5 or 10 or 20 years of experience with this title, but you don't have these 5 bullet points from the job descriptions, that's going to be a problem, right? So for me, that's something where it's like, go pay attention to those job descriptions and figure out what skills you should be learning and working on. Okay, so there's an analogy about career management and diets. Diets are funny, right? They're almost a bad 4-letter word. We start them on Monday. We're done by Monday night or Tuesday morning. We cheat. And then what do? We start again next Monday, or it's close enough to January 1. I'll just start at the new year, right? So we talk about that a little bit. And then the last module, realizing career happiness through self-awareness and maturity. Isn't that kind of funny? Through maturity. I'm telling people how to be mature. This is probably one of the most important messages that I have in many of my Pluralsight courses. Things don't work out, you guys. I mean, there's just things that don't work out in the short term. In the long term, they can work out beautifully. And I think one of my messages that I have here, let me share this analogy, because I don't think that I had this thought back when I created this course. I had realized a few years ago that I was going to be happy when I arrived, whatever that means. When I got there, I was going to be happy. And I never got there. Right? So I was never allowed to be happy because I never finished. When I finish school, when I get my job, when I get my promotion, when I get my real title, when I work at my target company, when I never happened, and I didn't allow myself to feel and be and express happiness because I was still working on getting there. And there was a day where I realized, you know what? I'm just not going to get there. I'm just not. I might, but it's not coming anytime soon. How can I enjoy the journey? And I think that's where I'm talking about maturity, right? I mean, happiness through self-awareness, which, by the way, is the first pillar of emotional intelligence, which we talked about last week, and maturity when we're like, you know what? I don't need to wait for these other things for me to be happy. I'm going to figure out how to be happy along the journey. That was one of my huge turning points, not just in my career, but in my life. All right. Talk about the difference between happiness, joy, and satisfaction. At the time I was reading Booker T. Washington, I want to say it was Up From Slavery. I can't remember exactly what it was. Guys, if you have not read this book by Booker T. Washington, I think it's his autobiography, get it today. It was one of the most impactful, amazing books and stories and histories that I've ever read about somebody who was born into the depths of oppression and did so much with his life. And it wasn't because he was given a lot of opportunity. It was because of what he made out of what he had, the resources he had, and his attitude along the way. It was one of my life-changing books. Why Things Change, Adjusting to Change, Fulfillment Through Purpose, Having a Purpose. Remember Simon Sinek, what's your why? The Job Bait and Switch, when you think you're going into one thing and you end up with something else. Techniques to Nurture Happiness, Depression versus Happiness. Building and Managing Your Career Plan. It's only an hour and a half long. You get it free. Go to Pluralsight and click on this button, not the start a 10-day free trial, but free April. Click on the sign up now. Don't put your credit card in. It won't even ask for it. There's nothing to cancel. This is a good course. This really is a good course. I'm proud of it. When I was watching it this morning, I thought, okay, I'm good. I don't have to redo this one. There's not gaps that I really feel like I need to fill in. This is a good check. So go check this course out. Tomorrow, same time, we're talking about how to have difficult conversations. The context was the book on difficult conversations in the workplace. I had plenty of difficult conversations in my last job a couple years ago, but I also have difficult conversations at home because I'm married and I have kids and I have neighbors. Like, it just comes with the territory. So check out the Difficult Conversations course on Pluralsight. My recommendation is watch it today so that when we talk about it tomorrow, it makes a little more sense. You can watch these as many times as you want. Free April, spread the word. Let people know they can get on Pluralsight for free for the rest of the month. If you're watching this after April of 2020, reach out to me and I should be able to get you a 30-day pass, I hope, if I have access to any. So with that, thank you for joining us and we'll see you next time.